Hi, Sean Kidney here again. At the launch of our electricity grids and storage criteria for client bond certification. For us, this is a big moment. We now want to bring grid companies around the world into the story, the green bond story, the sustainable bond story. Why? Because we've got to electrify the world, because we have to electrify everything. We need to increase electrification, something like fourfold by 2030, if we are to remove ourselves from fossil fuels and shift to a clean green economy. That's the story. To join, to talk about this today, I've just got a couple of friends. I've got Vera Brenzel, who's the Director of Policy and Communications at TenneT. You may not know TenneT. They're a massive grid operator in Netherlands and in Germany and around Europe. And we've got Monty Howard, who has served on the expert working group that confirmed these criteria, and is also the head of electricity network division at the European Investment Bank, one of the partners that we've had over the last few years in developing European taxonomy and other things. Thanks for joining me. I'd like to just ask you something about why this is important and tell us a bit about what you're doing. We might start with you, Vera, at TenneT, who have issued quite a few green bonds so far. Tell us your story.
Well, thank you, Sean, and very warm welcome to the listeners, to the audience of this very exciting group. Well, you know, if there are 350 billion euros of private capital in the EU spent yearly on a yearly base until 2030, there must be a channeling through private investors. And obviously we need, hard shoulders to channel that investment or funnel that investment towards sustainability. And I'm very grateful that this topic has come from a niche into the mainstream investment focus. So I think the most important thing is to get the tools and to ensure that the money flows more into sustainable activities. And that means standards, and that means understanding each other, and also means, I think, reaching out to a global level, which is what you're doing at the CBI. So very welcome to support you in this. And obviously this year is a very unique year. We've got Glasgow, and we need to make Glasgow a great success. And well, let me give you a short word on TenneT and green bonds. So TenneT is actually one of the 3 top green bond issuers in Europe. We've issued 12 billion altogether, and actually our largest ever green bond was issued this year, mid of this year. It was 1.8 billion euros, and it was in triple tranche. We call it triple green. And actually, yes, we had investors from 20 European countries. And how does that happen? It can only happen if we speak one language, if people know what they're investing in. And so altogether, 12 billion euro of green debt. What does that mean? Where do we put all that money? And it is very simple. Electrification, as you said, is the big new, I think is the lever and the vehicle to get all industries and all sectors decarbonized. And by 2030, TenneT wants to realize 28 gigawatts of connection capacity for offshore wind farms, notably in the Dutch and the German parts of the North Sea. You may know that the Netherlands has a very, very large grounds, maritime grounds. Germany is expecting to go big as well. And what we've seen, a ramp up from industry seeking to get connections, and also seeking to have planning security. And, you know, we are in charge of providing electrons in a secure manner. So we are also important for security of supply. And what I can tell you from an internal point of view, we've used all the data that is being bundled to provide to investors and financial community as a management tool. So we collect that data and we use it, and we were turning the entire business much more sustainable. So I think it has a double purpose, not only to fundraise or to provide money, but also to get the data and use it. But
so Vera, let me ask you a question before going to Monty. You've got some pretty major ambitions in terms of what you're doing in terms of new grid and enhancement of grid. Give us a flavor of how big this program is, especially in terms of potential forward capital raising for those investors out there behind me who want to talk about investment opportunities.
Well, we're expecting to invest 5 to 6 billion euros per year into grids in Germany and Holland, and which adds up to roughly 60 billion until the end of the decade. And
wow,
if you
look at the pipeline.
That is quite a big pipeline. And to be frank, I mean, these are the new giants in the energy business because, I mean, we are investing in Europe. We have a big locational element as well. We create growth, prosperity, and actually also talent. And it's also important to say that, you know, these are challenges because you don't have the people waiting on you on the market. You know, there is acceptance, permitting. There are lots of I think to-dos. But I think together with governments, especially we've got elections in major countries in Europe. So the Netherlands have just elected, the Germans are about to vote, to go to the ballot. So I think we will, together we will set up, speeding up and ramping up the permitting area.
Fantastic. Monty.
Hi there, everyone. Yes, I see.
Tell us about your work.
I hear about the bonds, and you know the EIB, of course, has been involved in the green bond market for a very long time. We're
the very first green bond was the EIB.
Exactly. Very first green bonds, and we've been and of course for many years now, electricity networks have been in part included in these bonds because you know, for many years there has always been a need for integration of renewables, and networks have always been critical to the connection of new power plants, offtake of generation by reinforcing grids, connecting large scale as well as distributed generation at the distribution level. So these activities are part and parcel of the growth of renewable energy and the support of the connection of renewables into our grids. And I think that has been part of our business for a long time. In addition to that, probably we have been doing a lot with interconnections because you have to keep in mind that with integrated networks, as we have here in Europe, an interconnection between different countries improves the efficient dispatch of power generation on both sides of the interconnection. And that facilitates a reduction of CO2 emissions. So that has also been and always has been a part of our renewable energy strategy and the support of grids for climate. Now, I think looking at just those two areas, the bank has been doing over the last 5 years, maybe 500 million a year in those specific sectors. It has been as high as 2.5 billion a year for grid connections, reinforcements for renewables. But what has come out new in the last years, of course, is now a focus on smart grids. And that means everything from facilitating demand-side management to adding greater amounts of flexibility in the network in order to accommodate the renewable generation. Storage options are now becoming a real point of focus for transmission companies. And these are new areas. But I think the biggest change this year has really come about with the EU taxonomy. And then the consideration that electricity networks in general are needed, absolutely essential to the decarbonization of our economies. And this means that we're talking about volumes of electricity in investment in electricity networks, as Sean said, maybe going up by 4 times. And so I think that this is really an important area where I think a recognition of the role that electricity networks play in decarbonization is now being codified. And I think this will make a big difference for the bank because there will be a much greater interest in the financing of these investments, and also in terms of the impacts it may have on our green bonds. And so when you look at enabling low carbon electrification, we're talking about how to support e-mobility, and basically the electrification of industry, which will really increase demand significantly and across all our networks. And I think these are what I think is the most exciting part of what's happened over this last year. It's a real step change in the way we look at electricity networks and to see how these networks can be facilitating investments.
And of course, that's what this is all about, this launching these criteria to support, to encourage green bonds, sustainable bond issuance, well, bond issuance, capital raising, let's be clear, but understanding the importance of networks, not just the connection to renewables, which has been really important, but it's more than that. It involves the junction boxes, it involves the demand management side, it's all aspects of networks, as well as the poles and wires And these criteria basically said they mirror the European taxonomy criteria. Let's be clear about that, which was itself a surprise to some actors in the market when we said, you know, if we're going to electrify everything, the scale we have to electrify, we need a lot more grid investments. And some actors on the investment side were saying, really? Really? Well, we're now rolling these criteria out globally. As I speak, these criteria are live on our website, ready to go. We are inviting grid companies around the world to apply for certification to get advantage of this incredible green bond market. Vera knows the benefits of the green bond market. They've been fantastic for TenneT, which is why it's such the third largest issuer. I think it is corporate issuer in Europe, or it's a lot of bonds you've done at TenneT. We would like to see every grid company now around the world get involved, take advantage, because we know that investors, the largest investors, as you will hear tomorrow, when we have many investors from BlackRock and so on to Fidelity speaking, they want more investments. They're asking for guidance of what's in there. This is about guidance. Thank you, Monty, for joining us today. And I have to say thank you for all the work you've done on those committee meetings, talking through these issues to come up with an agreement around criteria that are robust. Vera, thank you for the work you've done and that TenneT is doing, I have to say, in growing this. And I look forward to a lot more green bonds coming through in the future. And thank you, all our listeners. It's out, it's done. Please come and get some certifications, get some issuance into the market. Let's get this market growing. Let's match investors with the challenge of quadrupling the electrification of society by 2030.